practicing Muslim women have special needs when it comes to navigating motherhood and maternity care. For example, they prefer female healthcare professionals. They may require more layers or levels of privacy during antenatal consultations or when giving birth or breastfeeding. They may decide to read or listen to the Quran before, during, or after the birthing process. They may say the adhan, what we call the Islamic call to prayer, close to their newborn ears. They eat halal food, of course, and so on and so forth. So how do Muslim women in Britain navigate through motherhood and maternity care? Are systems designed to incorporate their needs? Do they receive adequate support to express their needs or share their preferences? Are the environments in which they work enabling? Are their voices being heard? Are there any organizations or platforms that are amplifying their voices? Or what else can be done to ensure that Muslim women give birth and care for their babies confidently and with less societal pressure? To explore these issues and answer some of these questions, I am really pleased to share that my guest, Farhanah Khan, one of the maternity leads at Chelsea and Westminster Maternity and Neonatal Voices Partnership, also called MNVP, has kindly agreed to join me on this new episode of Development One Topic at a Time. So stay tuned and let's dive in. Assalamu alaikum, Farhanah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you so much for your presence. I am sure that I will continue to learn from you today. Thank you again.
That is fine. I'm quite excited to. I mean, I can talk about maternity care and what we do all day, as long as you like. So I'm happy to be given this platform to be able to speak about all we do.
I know you are so passionate, and I love that about you. Thank you so much. Perhaps we could start by giving our audience an insight of your role and personality. So who is Farhanah Khan and what does your role at Chelwest entail, please?
So I'm Farhanah. I am a mother of 5 and 5 girls, 5 daughters. Allahumma barik. I am, I've had all of my births have been different. I've had all different modes of birth. I've had different experiences in the wards, from triage to labor ward to postnatal. I've had, and the antenatal care as well. I have my journey to where I am now started after my 3rd baby. So if I quickly have a little brief about my birth, because I think it would help you to understand what I do and why I do it. So my first baby was born, my first daughter was born in 2011. She was, it was that first baby panic when you don't actually know what's going on with your body. And it's a whirlwind. You don't know what's happening. You're quite young, and well, I was. And I was rushed in for a C-section. I didn't want this C-section, but I was coerced into having one. I know now, but what I didn't know back then was my body does prodromal labor, where I labor for quite a long time, so weeks on end. I know this now, but I didn't then. So when I was having contractions for a few weeks and going into the hospital every other day, and they kept sending me home, and they were getting quite frustrated with me, nobody explained this to me, that Farhanah, this is happening. Just relax at home and you'll know when it's the real deal. Nobody sat me down and explained that to me. I've learned over my pregnancies that this is what my body does. So that's the first thing that my first experience in maternity care in NHS in the UK. It was horrendous. I had a really awful time, which I'm very sure led to me having postnatal depression, which I didn't get diagnosed for due to all the taboos around postnatal depression. I didn't let anyone know. I kept it to myself. I got out of that dark hole, alhamdulillah. I still feel guilt. I still carry that guilt of how I felt towards my first child 13 years ago, because it wasn't a nice place to be. And yeah, it's still very much, I remember it, and it was probably one of the darkest times of my life. I then went on to have my second baby in 2014. She was a attempted VBAC. However, I was violently sick during the labor. I was projectile vomiting. I think I had a reaction to the epidural, because I did ask for an epidural. And so I went in for an emergency C-section for that baby. My third, 2018, I didn't know that I had the choice of a VBAC. I was told straight away by the consultant that, okay, you're having an elected C-section because you've had 2 previous C-sections. And as most women, I just listened and, listened to what the doctor told me and just went along with it. I found this experience to be quite surreal, because I wasn't in active labor at this time, and to take myself to the hospital, to then have my epidural put in, and then to then go to essentially have the C-section when I felt my body wasn't ready, because I hadn't labored, so I wasn't in that frame of mind that I'm about to give birth. So I felt it very kind of surreal, and then having this baby taken out of me when I knew my body wasn't ready and my mind wasn't even ready to have this baby right now, because it was elected. So it was a few days, weeks, I don't know how long earlier than I probably would have gone into labor. So that was my third. Now, after my third, I was going for my fourth, and then I realized that I didn't want to go through this again. I didn't want to have my body cut open for another time. So I went down the rabbit hole of education, really. I taught myself everything that I needed to know about my body and about women's bodies and how amazing they are, and how Allah has created us to give birth and to carry children. And I told them that I didn't want to have a C-section this time. So this is my fourth child now. I told them, I remember keeping this in till like my 36-week appointment. And I told them I want to have a vaginal birth. Now, my consultant was actually very supportive. They were very supportive. I went through a birth choices appointment, which was fantastic. They wrote a birth plan up for me. They supported me, and they let me know the risks, but they also reminded me that it's my choice, and they will support me in whichever way they can. So I had my fourth, so she was a VBAC. I had her vaginally. I didn't have the best experience so everything was great until Labor Day. So I stayed at home when I was in labor for as long as I could, because I didn't want to go into the hospital, because all the trauma I've had around entering the hospital and being forced into and coerced into a C-section, I didn't want that. So I thought, let me stay at home for as long as I can. And I did. I remember my waters going at around 2, and I stayed at home till about 6. And till the contractions were a lot closer together. So once I've come into the hospital, everything was great. But when I got into triage, it was evident that nobody had looked at my birth notes. So they weren't aware of those weeks and months of conversations I had with consultants. They weren't aware of that I was making a very informed decision. I wasn't just saying, oh, willy-nilly, I just want to have vaginal birth. I had put the work in, and I knew what I wanted. They weren't aware of this in triage. I had a horrendous locum doctor who, between each contraction, was telling me that I'm wasting everyone's time here, that I should just go for the C-section, that I'm making things difficult for everyone working, that I'm being silly. Between contractions, she was saying these things to me, and she was trying to coerce me into having a C-section. I had a really bad experience with the midwife there, who forced me to have a vaginal examination when I said I didn't want one. She told me they wouldn't be able to let me move to the labor ward unless I had one, which I know is not true. I heard her and the doctor having a conversation about me, once they'd closed the curtain, saying, "Oh, just hurry up and get her out of here," like I was being a nuisance. Now, if I wasn't as strong-minded and strong-headed and stubborn as I am, I probably would have given in there and then, because I was having back-to-back contractions. Baby was also back-to-back, so the pain was severe. I was in a lot of pain. And for people to attack you and try to coerce you at that very vulnerable time, I could have tried to it. I'm not listening to you anymore. I said to her, "You're trying to coerce me into having a C-section. I'm not listening to you anymore." And I just blocked her out of my mind. I remember shouting for my husband who was in the waiting room, and telling him that I don't want to talk to this lady. Now then, I had this absolutely phenomenal midwife. I remember her name, Joy. She came, she saw what was going on. She said, she put me in a wheelchair and she said, don't forget. She said, "Forget about them, focus on your labor right now." And she wheeled me into the labor ward, into the room. And yeah, I had my VBAC. They used forceps, which I felt again wasn't needed. I felt I was rushed because everyone was panicking at this point. Instead of it being a calm environment, there was about 6-7 different people in the room trying to get this baby out, and I was laboring fine. I was dilating fine. If there hadn't been this whole panic when I'd come in, and if they had read my birth notes, I don't think I would have needed those forceps either. I feel like they were now just rushing to get the baby out for no actual reason, because baby wasn't in distress. So I had an episiotomy and I had the forceps delivery. So she was born vaginally, which was fantastic. I felt elated afterwards that she was born how I wanted her to be born. And surprisingly, during that time, that horrible doctor just disappeared and never ever saw her again. So then let's move 3 years later. In 2021, I gave birth to my 5th baby. She was a intended home birth. So I had my pull-up at home, ready to have her. But then they didn't have any midwife to send out to me. So I was in that conundrum. Do I go in? Do I not go in? Do I go in? By this time, I had changed hospitals now. I've moved out of London. So I'm not in at the same hospital. I had a fantastic experience from this hospital from the very beginning. Antenatally, I just gelled with the midwife who was looking after me. I had continuity of care, so I saw the same midwife every single time, and she just understood me. She got me. She supported me. She was an advocate for women. It was just fantastic. But then when it came to, again, Labor Day, they didn't have anyone to send out to me. So I went, we were in the position we either free birth or I go into the hospital. The hospital was actually really trying to understand my situation, and they know my trauma, and they wanted to do what's best for me. So they let me know there's a room with a pool that I can use in the labor ward. And keep in mind, by this time, I had not actually been inside the maternity unit at this hospital because I've never been. The antenatal care was done in a separate place. So I've never been in this hospital because I was to avoid the whole hospital environment altogether. And now I went in last minute. We decided to go in because I had a bit of a bleed. We got to look, my husband and myself, we were like, this is probably the best thing to do. So we went in last minute. A midwife actually met me at the reception of the maternity ward, and she let me know that she's going to be with me the entire time. You went inside, everything was very consensual. Every time she touched me, she asked my permission. She was gentle, she was caring. They filled the pool up, and I remember just as I stood to get in the pool, my waters went all over the floor and baby was out. So she said, "Oh, baby's head," and we just jumped back on the bed, and she was born in 3 pushes. So I gave birth as soon as maybe about 45 minutes after reaching the hospital that day. I fully unmedicated, how I'd wanted, and I had the experience that I wanted. Of obviously the forceps experience was different to this because still it wasn't fully how I had planned it to go. But this birth, I could say, healed 13 years of birth trauma. When I gave birth to her, it was the best experience I could have asked for. Even postnatally, they just treated me with so much care. There's one time when I wanted a shower in the night. So I was only there for a few hours, and I wanted a shower, and the midwife came and she stood and she said, "Don't worry, I'll watch your baby." And by the time I'd come out, she had changed my baby's clothes too. So there was just so much love and care. And they also were very understanding that I didn't want to be here. I wanted a home birth. So they made sure they got me dealt with as soon as they could, and they could get me out of there as soon as they could. But this is where all of these experiences that I've had, and as a Muslim, very visibly Muslim woman, a brown Muslim woman, I just feel it's very important for us to be to speak, to have a voice in these panels and these tables where decisions are made regarding maternity care, so that we're representing what Muslim women need and want. And our experiences, you know, are not the same as somebody who's not a visibly Muslim, somebody who's even a white-skinned Muslim woman. I can talk for myself as an Asian brown-skinned Muslim woman that the way we are treated is not the same. You know, there's many aspects of my care which I can relate to the way I look. I mean, my first baby 13 years ago, I was in the theatre crying because I didn't want this C-section, and my husband, who's a black man, was advocating for me, telling them she doesn't want the C-section. And then the man who's doing who was the obstetrician, looked at my husband and said, "You can control her at home, but you can't control her here." Now that is purely because we're Muslim, because he sees a Muslim couple, and my husband's black as well, and he's got this stereotype in his head that he is controlling me when all he was doing was advocating for me. And it came to a point where I had to ask my husband, it really affected him. And it came to a point where they even threatened to remove him from the hospital because he was not happy with how being spoken to like that. And the saddest part is these things that happen to us in maternity care, in the theatre, in the labour ward, in the postnatal ward, are experiences which we hold on to for the rest of our life. I cannot tell you one good thing about that birth 13 years ago, but I can tell you how horrible I was made to feel. And I think we all carry that. I've spoken to women 30, 40 years later after giving birth, they still remember what that one person said, or they still remember how they were made to feel. So this is why I'm in this role, as I'm a maternity lead for the MNVP. And I proudly and very honorably listen to the voices of the voiceless. So there's those stories we don't hear too often, those people who do not provide feedback. You know, there's a big difference in those who do provide and don't provide. We don't hear from those who sadly have awful experiences, rightly so, because they don't want to go and talk to a clinician who may not understand them, may gaslight them into believing that what happened didn't actually happen, who they don't have trust in. So we are not clinical. We're not from the trust. We're a separate organization, and we are working for the service users to make sure their stories and their experiences are heard in order to make change within the environment. And I'm very proud to say that we do make changes. I have seen changes. I have seen people even just being more open to having these conversations, because they're uncomfortable conversations. They're uncomfortable conversations, but it's only by having them that we will know that something is actually, people are taking us seriously and building that trust with service users, because we know as Black and brown women, we don't trust the NHS. We don't trust the NHS. We do not trust maternity services. And only by voicing them and making sure these stories are heard is the only it's the way to bridge those gaps.
Wow. Thank you so much, Farhanah. I don't even know where to start. I am completely shocked. I purposely held all my emotions and reactions until you finished, because I felt like what you were saying was so powerful that, I had to let you say everything that you were saying there. And it's unbelievable what you went through. It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable, but it's also what I went through. So many women are going through.
Indeed.
But then I always think, I think of women who cannot speak English. Women who, even if they can speak English, they're not confident to advocate for themselves or to stand up for themselves or to speak up. Where's the care for those women who silently have to go through this extremely vulnerable moment, being treated in a disgusting manner, and they're not, and they have to go home and carry that trauma and look after a baby at the same time?
It's shocking. It's shocking. You had to go through postnatal depression. You had to go through, racist, actions, and you had to face stereotypes from, aimed at your husband. How, for example, he can treat you and he can control you at home, but he can't control you there. How dare people say that? You had to go through all these things. Episiotomy, C-sections many times without your consent, and then 13 years later, you felt like that last birth, that fifth birth helped you heal from all the trauma that you went through. It's shocking. I'm so glad, you feel much, much better after that experience. But as you said, where are the voiceless? And, where are the people who cannot talk, who cannot express themselves, who do not feel confident enough to share how they are feeling? So I am so glad you are in this position. I didn't know your whole story. I am so pleased that you are, you are one of the leads at 𝗪𝗪𝗀. It's always good to talk about 𝗪𝗪𝗀, as you know. I was there a few years ago, but I am so glad that you are holding this role. And I would like to know more about how you are impacting the community at the moment, please. And thank you again so much for sharing your story. And I'll go back to it again and again, but powerful, a very, very powerful one.
The impact in the community. So a major part of our role is to, as I said, to listen to those voices. So we attend community events, we attend, I found it's always it's a better outcome for attending places where women already are. So for example, play groups, stay in plays, toddler groups, places where they already are. So we're not making something extra for people to attend, because I'm very aware time is a privilege. People do not have the time. They may not have the transport to come to a new event, a new focus group in person or something like that. So we like to attend events where people already are and just having a conversation. And I know this, and I'm sure you know this too, but every single woman wants to talk about their birth.
Mm-hmm.
We want to talk about it because it's such an incredibly sacred time of our life.
Yeah.
So when we open those conversations, it's amazing the things that will happen. That one room, you'd hear stories which are amazing birth stories, which we hope will happen to every single person. And then you go on the other side and you hear absolute abuse. Of what I would call it, of women happening in the system. So we open these platforms up, and when we get those stories, we directly relay it back to the trust. So those people who are actually working in the trust, so the HOMs, the DOMs, the consultant midwives, the infant feeding team, the postnatal wards, the staff that's working the floors, everyone that we can, and the feedback relates to, we're in a position that we're able to get that feedback directly to them. And it's an amazing position to be in, because we can try to implement change there and then. So there's been some incidences where somebody's actually right now in the postnatal ward and they're not happy about something, and we're able to raise that concern so their worries are alleviated in that moment in time. And it's a different route rather than going through PALS or going through a more clinical complaint service, because we know the processes of those are timely. And not just that, this is a human being you're speaking to. So you're speaking to somebody who's been there before, who knows what it's like in those wards, who can relate to your story, who can empathize with you, and who actually is very passionate about making that change. And I'm more than, I mean, I have a phone conversation quite regularly with the service user who just like to let us know how their experience was. And it's a shame because not everybody knows, but every single trust has an MNVP. Every single trust has an MNVP which they can go and relate they give their feedback. And I think more people need to know that.
Yes, and I think that's really great. And in terms of that last point there, how do we ensure that there's more visibility and people are more aware of the services that exist within the MNVPs?
This is down to be honest, the staff in the wards, because they should be letting them know who we are. Our flyers and our details should be visible across the wards, which amazing at Chelsea it is. You'll see our flyer, it's very visible who we are there. But it comes down to the midwifery team and the care and the consultant midwives and everyone available at the time to signpost them to us. And even us, we do a lot of social media stuff. As MNVPs, it's also down to us to increase our visibility by attending these places. So going to those community events, speaking to people, holding those focus groups, like online. I like to do focus groups. I think it's more accessible for everyone. For people, word of mouth, people telling each other. I mean, the amount of people I speak to and they're like, wow, I did not know this existed. And they're just so happy to know. And then it's also nice. So we have a bi-monthly meeting. Every other month we have a meeting. So we hold half an hour firstly just for service users where we can have a conversation, a cup of tea. And then after that, we have a longer meeting where members of the staff attend. So we'll have everyone there. We'll have the head of midwifery, we'll have the DOMs, we'll have consultant midwives, cultural safety champions. It's a great place to be to find out what's actually happening. And service users are welcome to attend. This is all online.
Fantastic. I mean, Chelwest is exemplar in that. And I know that the leadership there is very intentional in terms of being inclusive and helping as many service users as possible in ensuring that there's psychological safety for service users and also healthcare professionals. Because as you mentioned there, cultural safety champions. And I remember we spearheaded it, and I co-chaired it when it initially began, and it's so great to see that it's still working and you're still incorporating it there, and it's amazing. Now let's now talk about Muslim women in the maternity realm. What challenges do we face in healthcare settings in the UK context? I think your example, and I think it'll be safe for me to say that your maternal experiences have perhaps included many of those challenges, but perhaps do you know of any other that we could explore today, please?
I think the aspect of Muslim women in maternity care, I think there's some things which are specifically for us. For example, hijab, wanting to be covered or as uncovered. Every Muslim woman has her own preferences. During labor, for example, or even that part, or even postnatally, knocking on the door before entering, and waiting for a reply, not just knocking and entering. Wanting to have an all-male team, if possible. Being aware of our cultural practices post-birth. So, for example, we like to put up a bit of a little taste of a date in the baby's mouth. Being aware of these cultural practices and not questioning what we're doing. There's lots of different little things that I think. So we created a Muslim Mama memo card a few years back. In one of our lovely service users, Abla, created this and co-produced with the MNVP. This card actually is just it shows exactly what we would like as Muslim women. All the basics that we would like. For example, we want Quran playing in the background. Everything I mentioned about having a male-only team, about how our hijab. And it's just a card to be presented at birth. So instead of having to talk it through when you're in that immense pain and you're not thinking about this, or you don't need to want to explain yourself, you can just hand it to your team looking after you. Now, this card is actually available everywhere. I've had a few different organizations who have taken it on, are using it. We can distribute it by email or Instagram, or if anybody would like to get hold of one of those. But I think just the basics of these is a good way of it's education. So hopefully when other members of health practitioners see these, they can share that information. Or it's just the only way I think we can bridge these barriers is by education, and I think this card is hopefully a good form of that and getting it across.
I agree. Education is very important, and I love the way you not only shared some of the challenges, but also how to overcome them. So thank you so much for that. And I remember a few years ago, you presented the Muslim memo card at one of the Maternity Voices Partnerships London Day, and it was great. And I really, really learned from it, and I was really pleased and how confidently you shared that. And it's so beautiful to know that it's a service user who co-produced it with the MNNVP. And I think that's a beautiful experience and a beautiful example of patient public involvement and engagement, or as we call it, PPIE. So that's amazing. And kudos to you again, 𝗪𝗲𝗃. You always show us the way. Thank you. I listened to your wonderful talk on Radio Ramadan, Hounslow. It was amazing.
Thank you. It was a bit of a funny one for me because I know my Urdu isn't the most fluent, so I had to I was a bit nervous about doing it in Urdu, but I got there in the end. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, mashallah, barak. When I first listened to it, it was in Urdu. I was like, oh, okay, I don't speak Urdu, I don't know. But then there were elements of English, and there's actually many, many elements in English, and I really, really enjoyed it, and it was really insightful. I think you talked about many things that we are exploring today, and I mean, and I'm sure that you've reached out to many other people, and many people also who speak Urdu, who perhaps do not speak English, got to hear about what the MNNVP is doing at 𝗪𝗲𝗄. So I really encourage you to keep doing that. Your voice is powerful. What you're doing is powerful. Your story is powerful. MashaAllah, barak. What you're doing is great. Thank you so much. As you know, Farhanah, or as you may know, I'm not sure, I have written a book about mental health entitled Lessons from Depression, which is available on Amazon and Waterstones, through which I remind people of the importance of hope. But in terms of mental health for Muslim women navigating through pregnancy, childbirth, childcare, or even baby loss, how do we remove the barriers in the community as a way of offering better and more relevant support? I mean, I note what you've just said about you perhaps having gone through postnatal depression, but never reporting it. It's amazing how that was my exact experience because of all the taboos that are related to it, but also because we don't trust services, as you said, and there's that fear of children being taken away. There's that fear of many things happening to us. So how do we bridge those gaps? How do we remove the barriers, please?
Yeah, this is a very personal one for me because I think if I go back the 13 years, I think I'm only now actually vocalizing that I'm quite sure I had postnatal depression. For many, I haven't, only very recently I've started to use those words. I think if I look back to Farhanah 13 years ago, why didn't she ask for help? I think it's that feeling of you're failing. You're failing. Why can't you do this? Why can't you just get up in the morning and look after the baby and get on with your life and heal and do all these amazing things that everyone else told you should be doing? Why am I feeling like this? Why is this such a dark, dark time for me? I remember sitting up all night, just staring in one space, in one direction, wondering what have I done with my life? And I think if I look back as to why I didn't reach for help, why I didn't speak to anybody about it, because of that, the taboos around it. You don't want to come across as somebody who hasn't got their life together. You don't want to look as this failure as a mum. You know, the society will see me as a failure, that I haven't been able to just pick myself up when everyone else around me seems to be doing so. I think the only way of combating these things is talking about it and realizing a lot of people feel that way after birth, especially that first baby, when your whole life has just changed. I think a lot of people feel, and the trauma you go through in birth, right? There's such a link between birth trauma and postnatal depression. The trauma you go through birth, you're trying to mentally process this, the horrendous experience you've just been through. You're sleep deprived, you are in pain physically, and now you have this little baby that is fully reliant upon you. It's a lot. And then to throw in other things, like not everybody has support, not everyone has family support. I don't have family support, and you have to deal with it on your own. Not everybody has this amazing village to look after them, to nurture them back to good health. And I think these are all aspects which can lead to those horribly dark moments. And talking about it, as you said there, Zainab, it's true. As Black and brown women, we do not like to turn to these services because we're afraid of social services being involved. We're afraid of it being put on our file that we had postnatal depression, for it to be used against us one day. Where we are very skeptical of asking for help because we know the statistics and we know the stories that we hear from our friends and families about what happens to Black and brown women in the systems. So the only way to overcome those is to talk about it more, and to even when it comes to things as in South Asian households who, for example, have many generations living under one roof, we tend to ask our aunties and our uncles and sorry, not uncles, they don't give birth, our aunties and our grandmas and our mums for advice, and their advice, as lovely as it may be, is probably outdated. It's probably stories they've heard, or something that's been passed down generation to generation, which may not actually be correct. They may also approach things in a matter of, oh, you'll be okay. You know, just you'll be okay. You know, like it may not be taken as we need it to be taken. So there's no harm in reaching out, and mental health services, perinatal mental health services now are so readily available. So readily available, especially we see at 𝗀𝗏 the amazing work that's happening around it, and how easy it is to be signposted to perinatal mental health services and to get that help that you desperately need. And I think we need to find those barriers, especially when it comes to the Muslim community, and try to overcome those barriers. We also, as Muslims, there's a big stigma around you're not Muslim enough. That's why you're going through. That's why you're going through these horrible things, because you're not turning to Allah enough. You're not a practicing Muslim. That's why you're feeling these bad thoughts, and you're terrified of being a mum, and you're terrified of looking after your child because you're not Muslim enough. And I think we need to really, really take a deep look at ourselves and think, sometimes people need an extra help. Yes, we turn to Allah. Yes, that is our first point of call. We know that as Muslims. We know it's inherent in us. We know we turn to Allah when we need help. To say to somebody who is in the darkest moment of their life, you need to turn to Allah, when you don't know what they've been doing, you don't know how they've been crying to Allah every single night, you don't know the suffering and the pain they've been going through in their salah, you don't know how they have reached out for Allah. But Allah gives us means, right? So Allah has provided us means for help. Yes, you turn to Him, and then you get some help, you get professional help, and this is a means for Allah to help you. Allah has made this available for you to go and seek help. But alhamdulillah, if it works, we say Bismillah, we go and contact that organization. We speak to our perinatal mentality. We say Bismillah, it's through Allah that it's going to work. So we need to this is a big barrier. I hear it all the time with anything going on. Like something, I can go into baby loss, right? I mean, inshallah, this doesn't happen to myself, yourself, anybody that we know close to our hearts, but it happens. And there is a horrible, horrible way of people saying to people who have experienced baby loss, looking at it as, oh, this is your trial. This is what's happened to you. We know this. We know this is a trial. Like the very basics of our Islamic faith, we know this is a trial for us and that we need to overcome this trial. And through Allah, inshallah, we will overcome it. We will get better. The days will get brighter. But in that moment in time, let the mother grieve. Let her cry, let her grieve, let her lash out. Let her mourn the loss of her child. Do not turn this into a religious thing where it's like you need to turn to Allah, or this is just your test. It belittles what the mother's going through at that time. I think as a community we need to be smarter and in the way we talk to each other. And unless you've been in that situation, I don't think you can speak on how a person should be feeling and minimize it to such an extent that you just need to pray your salah and you need to make dua and it will be better. I think we need to hold space for people who are grieving in probably the most hardest time of their life and let them mourn. Sorry, I've gone off on a different aspect, but it's something as a Muslim community we really do minimize what each other are going through and forgetting that we're actually human beings. Yes, we know the end all and be all is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants for us. We know Allah is the best of planners. We know this, but sometimes we just need to be a bit more human with each other. And that comes down to mental health. It comes down to baby loss. It's just even maternal health, even maternal journeys, pregnancy journeys. If somebody's a little worried about, they haven't felt their baby move a little while, they feel this is something that we're talking about actually at this time in antenatal education for South Asian households. If you're not feeling your baby kick and somebody may say to you, oh, inshallah, it'll be fine. No, go into the hospital and go and check your child. We know, I can't stress it enough. Allah has put all of these things in place for us to use these services, and we shouldn't feel shame or any kind of way of using them, and everyone else around us should be supportive in that.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Farhanah. I could not have put it in a better way. I mean, we need to wake up as a community because Islam is a way of life. It's not just you on your prayer mat there and saying everything will happen, everything will be okay, inshallah. It's about being practical. It's about incorporating the deen in everything that you do. And there's a reason why there are mental health services. There's a reason why there are psychologists. There's a reason why, as you said, we need to hold those spaces because we are human, and the humanness needs to be shown everywhere we go in everything that we do. And I think it's beautiful the way you put it. That's why yesterday, I was out and about, and I went into East London Masjid, and then I saw a poster there where they were actually, saying that there's a space for women who are going through baby loss, and I was really pleased to see that.
Wow.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. I was really, really pleased to see that. MashaAllah, Allahumma barik. And as you said, I heard you say, may this never happen to me or you, but I just wanted to highlight that as I had a podcast with 𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗍𝗏 a few months ago, that I actually did mention that I went through baby loss. Alhamdulillah, qadar Allah, mashallah, fa'ala. But as you said, again, it was a test, but alhamdulillah, Allah gave me the time and the space to grieve, to heal, to cry.
Sorry. I'm so sorry to hear you went through that, sis.
That's okay, sis.
Allah unite you with your baby in the highest of Jannah. Ameen.
Ameen. It was a miscarriage, 2 miscarriages. BaarakAllahu feeki.
But I'm happy to hear that you did take your time to grieve, and you did give yourself space for that and to really feel what you're feeling.
Indeed. Alhamdulillah, because you have to remember that, yes, it's a test, but at the same time, Allah knows that you're a human being. So you are a Muslim, you have to incorporate that in everything that you do. But it's just one thing that you said about not being able to publicly acknowledge it. I mean, acknowledge your, your mental health issues, your postnatal depression. It's the same thing for me as well. It took me years to actually talk about it, to name it. And the same as, the baby loss as well, because it felt like I couldn't do that publicly because it's taboo. Because again, you are scared of being labeled as someone who's weak, or again that there's that fear of failure that you mentioned. At that point, there was a time when I felt like I was a bystander of my own life. I could just watch it and just saying, just in self-denial and saying, this is not happening to me, especially in terms of the postnatal depression. And I felt like it could not be me, it's someone else. I was just a spectator, just watching it, because it takes courage, I guess, to speak about it. It takes courage to acknowledge it. It takes courage to get out of that thinking in our community and say that, it is happening to me. I need to do something about it. And it takes a whole village, as you mentioned, and sometimes you don't have that whole village. That's why I'm really grateful to the people who were there and I needed them. But again, the question that you asked about why you ever started talking about it, for me, I thought maybe it's because I got involved into the maternity realm and I started seeing that, actually, if you talk about it, there are not that many consequences. Of course, sometimes you see that, some children are taken away from their respective parents, but, there are times when that doesn't happen because there are procedures to be followed and every case is normally assessed according to its own merits before decisions are taken accordingly. And as you mentioned, there are many, many services now for people who are going through depression. So it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to seek help. So thank you so much, Farhanah. I mean, I'm so glad that I invited you today. I'm so glad that you accepted it. We are having a very, very powerful conversation.
No, thank you, Zainab. I echo everything you've said. And I think the more people like me and you who do speak about it, it will hopefully let another sister know that, wait, I'm feeling like this and it's okay to talk about it. And I think that's what we need to do. If we're breaking down those stigmas and taboos of let's just, let's keep it to ourselves, let's just suffer in silence. No one's getting a medal for that. No one is getting a trophy for suffering in silence. Nobody is praising you for suffering in silence. Like, we need to really understand that. And this whole thing, for being a martyr for your health, and just what, no one's gaining anything from that. So I think the more we do speak about it, it'll encourage other people to realize that, wait, life isn't this picture perfect Instagram world where a mum has a baby and bounces back in 2 days. Like this. No, this is real life. And I think opening those conversations, talking about it, even acknowledging what we went through and giving it those words like postnatal depression, abuse in maternity care, using those words is so powerful. And it will help somebody else realize that, wait, that was not right how I was treated. What that lady said to me was not right. What being handled, being touched without consent was not right. And it enlarges, it gives space to this whole conversation to be had, and this empowerment to go further and to make sure this doesn't happen again, not to only ourselves, but to our children. I have 5 daughters. I will die on this bridge of making maternity services better for them. Like, I could never let them go into a room, into triage, into a labor ward, and be treated like nothing because of how they look. My daughters are Black, brown, and Muslim. They have everything going against them. Like, it's so important. That's why I'm just so passionate about it, because it's not. Yeah, I just need something, and we need something to change. The stories I hear, it's wild, and something needs to change. And I think only by us speaking about it so openly and holding these spaces and spreading the word and letting people know, and Because when you do realize that, when I go to events and they see that I'm not from the trust, I've been where you are, it's amazing the conversations we have. And they slowly start to trust me a bit more. So somebody might give me a snippet of their journey, and then they'll come up to me again and they tell me more. And then that trust is built. Yeah.
That's right. That's right, Farhanah. I'm so glad you are going to fight for this, and you're going to increase that passion that is just, I can feel it in your voice, and I can feel it in the actions that you are undertaking. And I'm so glad that we are holding spaces, and we are, hoping to change so many issues that are affecting us in our Islamic environment as Muslim women. Thank you so much for what you're doing, Farhanah. I mean, we are nearing towards the end of this episode, although I really don't want it to end.
I could talk about this all day. Don't make me. I'll get my lunch and I'll come back because we'll keep talking.
Let's do that, right? I mean, yeah. What you're doing, what is so powerful, and as you said, it's really, really powerful to name the things that are happening, and that goes again with, it supports what you said earlier about education, how education is important because it is empowering. So let's keep talking about it.
I think also when I say to name things, I think we should also name the people who are not treated the same in maternity care. So we hear people say, oh, marginalized groups, this, that. No, it's Black and brown women. Let's use those terms. It's Black and brown women who have the worst outcomes in maternity care, and their babies have the worst outcome in maternity care. So meetings I attend, I use those terms. I don't tiptoe around these using these words, because only when we use these words, it gives light to what is actually going on, and it makes it real.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, using the right language is so important. I cannot agree with you more on that. It's such a great point, and I'm so glad you've mentioned it, because I don't like terms like BMA, BAME.
Yes.
What are you trying to say? What does that even mean? It's not othering.
Yes, it's othering. What it does again, it's an acronym. The NHS likes to give acronyms to things because it kind of it takes us away from what it actually is. So use the correct term. Say Black and brown women. Say visibly Muslim woman.
Indeed. That. Yeah, and that, I mean, use the correct words, use the correct terms, and address the issues as they should be addressed. I mean, I wrote a blog on that about the importance of language and why language matters. And maybe I'll share it in the description of this video. I'll share it with you, Farhanah. But yeah, acronyms, the NHS, I think it seems like it's a sea full of acronyms. I think the first few years when I joined, you go into meetings, you're like, what are you trying to say? There's so many acronyms, but yeah, you learn and people start to break them down and, use the real terms. Thank you. So Farhanah, again, we are almost done with this episode. And I wondered if you had any closing thoughts to share with our listeners, please.
Closing thoughts would be to educate yourself, to empower yourself with the correct knowledge, and to know your rights as a birthing person in the UK, in the NHS. I would say to advocate for yourself in situations always, because I think something that we really need to bring to the forefront of our mind when using maternity services, they are services for us to use. Giving birth in the UK, in the NHS, is not them delivering your baby for you. You are ultimately the person going through the pregnancy, giving birth to your child. They are just there to assist you. So take back the control and power of your childbirth.
Thank you. A powerful end note there. Thank you so much, Farhanah. You are so right. I mean, service users are the experts of their own bodies, as you said. I'm just paraphrasing everything there. Thank you so much. And I think people need to be aware of that. When you go to healthcare settings, trying to give birth, remember that you know your body better than anyone else. And communication is key. So thank you so much for this insightful discussion. I've really, really enjoyed this exchange of ideas. You are definitely an asset to 𝗟𝗏. Please stay there.
We'll see. It's coming up to 3 years now. We'll see where this takes me.
Inshallah. But, mashallah, Allahumma barik for everything that you're doing. May Allah continue to bless you, sister. Keep up the good work, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair for having me on here, and I'm looking forward to speaking to you soon.
Afwan, thank you so much. And dear listeners, thank you for staying until the end. It's always good to count on your support as this podcast, your podcast development, one topic at a time, continues to evolve. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, or share the podcast with your networks. For those who have are using, or even intend to use Chelsea and Westminster maternity services, please don't hesitate to reach out to your MNVP. I am sure that Farhanah and her team will be more than happy to help. Have a great day, everyone. Assalamu alaikum, Farhanah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.